And that, children, was the story of the 3 bears. And now it's time to brush your teeth, pop yourselves into bed, and shut the hell up, as it's now Slick Podcast O'Clock.
You have tuned in for a Slick Podcast. I'm here to seek the truth. Live from Scotland around the UK, the one and only Slick Podcast. Enjoy the show. Can I ask important questions? No matter how bizarre the truth might be. Tune in for Slick Podcast. Keeping it real, keeping it groovy.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or a very good day to you when and wherever you're listening from. And a very warm welcome to the show. I'm your host, Simon Laurie King. Coming up on today's show, it's the return of researcher, author and broadcaster and a definite friend of the show, Jared Murphy. Jared's book, It's Not Aliens, Worse, It's Us, Discovering Our Lost History, was, as you know, the subject of my first episode of the Slick Podcast. I've asked Jared to come back onto the show for a catch-up on what his plans are for this year, and I also have questions relating to his book that I didn't ask last time, and others that I'd like his opinion on. So without further delay, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Jared Murphy to the show.
Hi.
Jared, it's good to have you back. Jared, your book, It's Not Aliens, Worse, It's Us, Discovering Our Lost History, was the subject of the first episode of the Slick Podcast. And since that first cast, you also kindly agreed to come onto the show with your friend and publisher, Ola Phillips, and we discussed the secret space program. You and I also talk on a regular basis about your ongoing research and plans for the near future. I've really looked forward to recording this follow-up episode, covering the huge and diverse topics you cover both in your book and when you are co-hosting with Michael from Conflict Radio. So let's get the ball rolling on this one. In 1909, explorer G.E. Kincaid allegedly made a remarkable discovery during an expedition to the Grand Canyon. This expedition was also under the direction of the Smithsonian anthropologist S.A. Jordan. I know that this particular story has piqued your interest, so could you tell me a little bit more about the story and your opinion to its authenticity? And further, I also believe you're planning an expedition of your own to this area, and that undertaking is truly of a perilous nature.
Yeah, well, it's definitely, if you're not going to use the proper equipment, kind of an issue, for sure. You don't want to go down. Whether it's 100 feet or 1,000 or 2,000, you definitely want to be secure in your rope work. And, it's not, I know it's, the warning we give when we take climbers is, climbing is inherently dangerous. You need to be worried about it. It is something, obviously, if you fall, like any sport, whether you just hit the ground hard or get tackled, it can be, some injury can occur. And clearly, if you fall 20, 30, 40, 50 feet on a rope and you hit granite or sand, whatever, any kind of rock, you can experience injury. But yeah, so it's with the really, really brilliant climbing crew that I have, the climbing aspect of it is not as dangerous as people would think. It is definitely endurance related. It is definitely not cool temperatures all the time. And between temperatures and the height, it's not the shortest height, but we have a place in that's pretty famous called Devil's Tower in Wyoming. And that is very famous because some people think that it's a tree. Some people think it's a volcanic plug. And either way, there are routes on it that are, the height of it is about 1,200 feet. And the routes are 900 to, 700 to over 1,000 feet by the time you start climbing. So to climb the side of the Grand Canyon, which can range to 6,000 feet, depending on where we climb, to look at a cave that the authenticity of is definitely lacking. There is no indication. Yes, there's the conspiracy of The Smithsonian has no one of this, like this just didn't happen. There's the legends that it was done on April 1st in order to cause a ruckus because it would be funny, and then because April Fool's Day. But then there is really no substantiating evidence that this really did happen. And there's a number of silly inconsistencies with the story itself. One is anyone who rock climbs knows that if you are going to climb, because the idea is that it's from the rim of the canyon, this Kincaid cave that was filled with Egyptian mummies and Egyptian gold artifacts and treasures galore and an entrance to a secret underground citadel. I don't know how citadel versus city versus town versus stable with horses. I don't know how they decide to use the word citadel and don't sometimes. Like, are we supposed to drop into our Lord of the Rings references and think, oh yeah, it's the underground dwarven city of the keep, I don't get it. But the reality is that there is absolutely no indicators that this is true. And then there was a group that was featured on America Unearthed that just shortly said, they ended up getting down about 800 feet and then they were short water. And I don't know the details of that expedition. I don't know how they were not, exhausted or stuck. We're still trying to find that out, because there are of the canyon. Okay, not the Grand Canyon, but within the Grand Canyon, there are individual canyons. And there is one that's labeled and named Marble Canyon that is essentially a 40-mile stretch. And within this stretch of Marble Canyon, there's an area that's said to have been the Kincaid Cave. And so, dynastically speaking, I think Dave Brody's fictional work that just came out called Romerica is about the Romans in America. And one of the things that he wrote about and definitely discussed was that Mark Antony and Cleopatra had a son. The Egyptians, the Romans were trying to get rid of. Everyone famously knows what happened to Mark Antony and Cleopatra. We won't repeat that one right now, but there's a possibility that anywhere from 5,000 to 55,000 Egyptians left with untold amounts of treasure and supplies, and that the king, that Cleopatra and Mark Antony's son left and ended up in the Grand Canyon area, ended up in the United States, that the Egyptians were well aware of the United States, and that they ultimately ended up burying their dead and assorted other things, and that this Kincaid Cave is a remnant of that. And I'm only talking about it in this way is because it's so exciting to think of Indiana Jones kind of mummies and treasure and finds. And that more interesting aspect is that the Grand Canyon is very ancient. And one of the things that's very rare to find in the United States, and I think it goes to the antiquity and something we rarely talk about, not you and I, but in general that I talk about, is the megalithic, the very mysterious, like America's Stonehenge. I'm going to America's Stonehenge May 1st. I'm giving a live lecture. But it has megalithic elements. And we have dolmens like standing stones and other indicators of massive structural supports to maybe ancient, high-tech, ancient human buildings that in America seem to be lacking, yet there's dolmens from the east to the west coast in America. And the Grand Canyon, because of its depth, indicates, yes, a great amount of antiquity and weathering, but there are indicators that may show signs of advanced cutting, just like in Egypt, just like South America or Central America, any of the high-tech tooled, not just polygonal masonry, but the tooling as far as cutting into rock-cut ruins, exactly like Petra, Jordan, or other areas where there are just very, very finely cut caves. And there was a crap load of mining in Grand Canyon. But the reality is that it is very hard for Kincaid or anyone or a single miner from the 1800s to get a rope of any capacity and make a safe descent or ascent from the Grand Canyon floor up 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 feet, as you depend again to 6,000 feet to get to a cave or to create a cave to explore for minerals. And so there are many natural caves in the Grand Canyon. There's one that's considered an auditorium. It's right on the river. When people do rafting tours, they stop. And there was a reference from Kincaid that, it could seat 50,000 people. Well, it's a natural cutout. This one's just from the river water. But there are other caves basically what we want to do is take our experienced climbing crew that is more than capable of setting routes, not for the sake of creating for climbers out there. Setting a route means setting a route that would be fun and challenging or something interesting that people would like to go out and climb. We're not doing that. We're trying to set routes for the safety of the group to get as efficiently as possible without the use of climbing holds, but to efficiently and safely get to these caves that are anywhere from 1,000 or 2,500 feet from the rim of the canyon, or similarly, or 3,000 feet above the basement or the floor of the canyon. And the idea is to get to caves that appear to us not filled with mummies or ruins or treasures, and I'm not saying that wouldn't be cool, but what we're looking for are these indications of rock-cut ruins. We're looking for ruins that appear to have been cut, like in Petra, from tooling and machining that are not datable to the 1800s, or groups of men mining. There was a big bat guano company that was mining out, no joke, they were mining out bat guano from a cave that's so big that they estimated originally that there was over $100 million of bat guano. It turned out to be about $10 to $16 million worth of bat guano, and they mined it for about 8 years. And then when a United States military fighter jet pilot clipped the cable line in the Grand Canyon, he flew below the fly zone, clipped the canyon cord, and they decided to not continue mining at the Guano Point, which is visitable. Anyone can go to the south rim of the canyon, and Guano Point is part of where the skywalk is. There's some indigenous natives that they own. It's their land. That area is theirs, and they created a skywalk. It's quite impressive to go out, and a lot of people are terrified because you're walking out. Ironically, it's not a short fall, but it doesn't actually take you out over. At that point, the canyon is almost 4,600 feet deep. But the first drop off, if the floor was to fall through on the skywalk, you would only fall 2,300 feet.
Oh, well, that's not bad then.
Feel better?
Oh yeah, you'd feel a lot better about it. So your intent and your crew's intent is to maybe dispel the myths and to get some facts, what's there and what isn't there. Because if you look on the internet, it's like a lot of things, it's definitely Egyptians. They were definitely there. And I was thinking when I read the story, because you and I have talked about this before, off of air, and I'd asked you the question, well, how would they have got there? You've clearly said to me before, well, they couldn't. It's as simple as that. Now, they're expert climbers. And I think myself as well, if there was those sort of artifacts there, then they would be long gone. But I just don't. I think this story. No, it's a great story, and I wish you and your crew luck. And you need to keep us informed of that. So if I could just move on, Jared, the subject of Antarctica is certainly the stuff of conspiracy and misinformation. Added to that, its hostile environment is potentially deadly, and the logistics and money involved in organising an expedition to this place is mind-bending. Could you talk a little bit about Antarctica and maybe sort some of the wheat from the chaff regarding the claims of the so-called Richard E. Byrd diary? And what if I could give you the money and the opportunity, what would you be looking for and where would you go?
Well, so we've been looking at, so there are two places. One is so the story says that Byrd gets to Antarctica and finds what could be the center of the earth, or an underground, at least a vast complex and people. And then we have Richard Miller Allen, a physicist and doctor that was with Byrd And there is definitely people who are part of High Jump and the 2 expeditions that went to the North and South Pole. So we have some area that we know that the location exists, at least the directional pointers. But then the diary, and this is for every listener out there, this is definitely our job, and it's to be 6 degrees of separation from the truth, and to get to the truth and to get it all out there for everyone to experience. The truth is I can't find any indication that the diary is real. Not one, it's all secondhand information. There is no direct provenance of the diary. None. Zero. Zip. Doesn't exist. It's exactly Zechariah Sitchin's work on the cuneiform stuff. It's all BS. It's just, I'm not saying BS to Sitchin just to say BS to the diary. I am saying, for everyone out there who keeps repetitively repeating the stories of the Anunnaki based on Sitchin's work, it's a complete fraud, and you're perpetuating something that is untrue. And I'm trying to be more firm with it, so that, again, go out and not just, it's not about agreeing with me, it's about we can't be distracted from these mistruths. And the diary of Admiral Byrd is so exciting and compelling because of the content of the diary and the descriptions of what is being seen that people can't help. And there's this mythos being built on it that is just so frustrating. And it's just difficult to keep hearing people talk about different races and things going on at the center of the earth when there is no provenance on the Bible. There's no provenance on the Byrd diary. There is no proof of it of it being real. It's just a book that everyone's read. It's a third or second hand account of this diary. And so all I'm asking for everyone out there is that we get a hold of pages of the actual diary and that it's authenticated. But the diary itself, literally, to the best of my knowledge, does not exist. Only the story about the diary exists, and everyone needs to be aware of that. So I'm not just trying to be a poopy pants and step on everyone's bubbles here, but the truth is that Antarctica is a very mysterious place. And the truth is that some of the oldest petrified remains of trees in Antarctica that predate the Jurassic Age, that predate dinosaurs, that Antarctica itself was once vastly forested, that we have things like the P. Reese map. Admiral Reese's map is not the only one, but that we have indications that we, in even 8 or 12, in the last pre-Younger Dryas, that we have maps of Antarctica without ice on the coastline. And those maps, I'm not even saying that they're post-Younger Dryas, that they're just in the last 9 to 12,000 years. They could be pre-Younger Dryas, and the maps that we're seeing that show the uniced coastline of Antarctica could represent a time prior to Younger Dryas. And so basically we have a very mysterious place that, although ecologically is being studied, the big question is, are there indications of man? Are there indications of a more advanced man? And are they there along with these other indicators of whether it be Vikings or here we are with dynastic peoples visiting Antarctica? We want to know what's there. And what's interesting is that there are a lot of misnomers about, hey, you can't go to, we had someone say, well, you need to get 126 countries have time for this. But it's a legit, I think it's a legit misnomer. One of the things that somebody said was, and there are so many, but this one in particular, I think heightens and capstones the issues with learning about Antarctica and traveling there, is that, this person commented on a live show that, you need 126 countries to sign off for you to go. And I mean, just think of the common sense of that. I mean, you get one country to, what do? You submit internet paperwork and you get visa stamps from 126 countries. I mean, that's just absurd. But the point is, it sounds like it's going to make sense, but it's not a true statement. There are cruise ships, there are sailboats, there are French and or assorted other resupply vessels. And you can literally risk your life like Brad Olson did. And, publisher, author, also fellow researcher, he's been to Antarctica, but him and 30-something people took a sailboat just to, I guess, get sick and say you did it. But you can leave the Falkland Islands on a sailboat. They went $6,000 cash a piece. Yes, and they had to go through customs and tell the customs, yeah, well, we're all going on a sailboat. We got $6,000 for the captain. But then this is not a short trip. When you go to Antarctica, it's not like it's a bunch of retail corporate stores and a gift shop. I mean, you're going to a continent that is being researched by many countries, that has essentially a couple places where you have to go like you're going camping. You have to bring your own food. You have to go like you're traveling on a galleon, like back in the day, like you're going to travel the world and explore. The supplies you bring are the ones you'll have.
Sorry to interrupt. So it's a complete misnomer. It's not correct information where we're led to believe, myself included, that no, you cannot go to Antarctica. You're not allowed. You're telling us that is absolutely disinformation. If you got the money and the balls, you can go.
Yeah. So look, I'm all for anyone beating me there. It's not about a race. It's just about choosing to actually go and actually want to explore. I know there was a couple girls that went that apparently they were just big cross-country skiers. I can't recall their name. Brad Olson talked about it on one of our shows on conflict, and we were talking about it, but they apparently got stopped and turned around by the secret dark black helicopter sort of thing, where they came down and said, look, you guys aren't going any further this direction. So the issues are to explore as far as we can. There are some people who would like to go to for instance, so when it comes to Admiral Byrd, there were German bases that date back to World War II. There are German bases in Antarctica that still exist. And what they look like or what the remnants of those are, absolutely, if you have the money and you want to do the planning, because on a bad day, Antarctica at dead center can get to 150 below zero. Now, Minnesota, where I am, can get to, we had actual temperatures below 40 or below 30 something below freezing, which is significant. And then with wind chill, it was 60 below. I mean, that's throw buckets of water in the air and watch it freeze and mist into ice instantly. 150 below is insane. So there are periods in Antarctica where, in quotes, it warms. But with the proper equipment, with proper guidance, you can, I can tell you right now, I mean, I've planned the trip, like from where we are in preliminary stages, it's going to be between 600,000 or 700,000 to around 1 million. And that's about 25 to 40 people. And that's with massive tracked vehicles. That's with a private ship dropping us off. It's not an impossible task. It's just many people are used to traveling like they do on a cruise ship, which you can take a cruise ship to Antarctica and you can snap photos or you could take the sailboat and you can take the dinghies, whatever they call them, to the shore, and you can stop at a few places. And there's even a company actually out of United Kingdom, which I found accidentally, that takes you diving in Antarctica. So you can go to Antarctica with them and go on diving trips and tell everyone that you dived in Antarctica. So depending on your desire for bragging rights, you can do that. But there have been on podcast after TV show after podcast and radio show a dialogue about, oh, there's this in Antarctica, there's that in Antarctica. It's like, okay, I'm tired of it. There's enough people with enough money. It's apparently a matter of who wants to double down and go with me. There's where we're at.
That's an excellent explanation. But there's all sorts of theories. There's pyramids, and there's a big hole that is covered up by Google, and it goes to the center of the earth, and that just I don't know. It's interesting, if anything else. And I just thought that, I mean, I know you'll get there one day. I'll definitely know, and obviously I want exclusive on that.
So yeah, hey, look, we're planning it. And so planning it is, I mean, like specifics. I'm not talking about the shipping companies that, look, you can, it's really this simple. Like recently there was a jam up in the Suez Canal, right?
Yeah.
Okay, there's supply vessels. They travel all around the world. They go where you want. They go where you pay them. So most people on their list of stuff to do is not rent a supply vessel. What do we need to do? We need to be able to crane on shipping containers and crane them off. So shipping vessels have the ability to transport shipping containers with supplies. So we are going to take shipping containers and we are going to, of course, have our supplies for bases. And then the plan is to, as far as we are allowed via any restricted zones, we are going to head towards where we think it is viable and possible to prove these items out. And again, you could talk all day long about there's a hole to the center of the earth, Jules Verne, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'm all excited about it, but I'm being a little frank about it because it's not a maybe someday. It's here are the companies that we know we can rent for vessels. How much are they going to cost? How much is it going to cost to pay 25 to 40 people's wages for a 2-month expedition? Because they can't go for free. It can't be. I mean, if you're independently wealthy and can travel for free, great. But we have to pay for being dropped. We have to be dropped on from a ship. We need to either retain the ship for the entire 2 months as kind of a home base. We need to be able to set up camps as we go. Antarctica, just to give people an idea, is bigger by a bit than America. But America's a good, if you plopped America down on Antarctica and fatten it up on the top and the bottom, a little bit of Canada, quite a bit of Central America, or at least Mexico, you're getting closer to Antarctica's true size. So we have to know where we're going. And so right now the stages are this. It's pricing out again and making a list of the true equipment needs. And then it's the question of, okay, what is it? What are the costs going to be for the group? What is the testing equipment, or what is the kind of drilling or testing? What kind of, again, they core sample like in Greenland right now to test the ice to determine melting and thawing and carbon dioxide and oxygen levels in the world. There are many ways to do core samples of ice to test for all sorts of interesting components, but we're looking for, where is there hard ground exposed? Where is there potential settlements? Where would there be, if I was an ancient lost advanced civilization, where would we be going? So we need to narrow all that down to literally get a list of, this is what our fuel expenses are. And so this isn't, oh yeah, neat, someday maybe we're going to do this. No, this is a hardcore planning stage, and it's not very sexy or interesting probably for most people. The idea that is interesting is that I do think there's some people out there that are kind of bored, adrenaline junkies that may want to participate. They should email.
Am I right in saying, Jared, that the continent of Antarctica, because when I think of Antarctica, it's no bigger than, say, Ireland, and of course it is a continent. So am I right in saying, I think you've mentioned it, that the continent of Antarctica is probably the last bastion of the original last piece of Pangea, even though the other continents are and countries are obviously part of that one landmass, but it's relatively, if at all, changed since it was Pangea. Am I right in that, or am I completely off the mark?
Well, so some people think it was attached as far as the Great Lakes and Greenland. The number I'm getting here is 5.83 million square feet, or square miles, square feet. That'd be a tiny place. So I guess it's the fifth largest continent, nearly twice the size of Australia.
And relatively unchanged. So I've heard you hypothesize about, obviously, it's the whole thing, isn't it, about you could be saying, we're going to go and see that big hole, we're going to go and see the alien pyramid, but you're not about that at all. You're great if it's there, but I'm just going to go and look. That's the best way.
Well,
so
yeah,
go on.
Yeah. we should go with our biggest and best suspicions on. So here's the truth that's missing. You and I, or at least me, I'll date myself and say, when you see Indiana Jones and you're like, well, one of these days I'm going to find the mummy, and that was enough. That was enough for most explorers. It was, let's just literally get in a bobsled and stake a flag at the North Pole, stake a flag at the center of Antarctica. It was just enough to go there. And then it was, okay, well, you can do exploration, but what we are all aware of in the dialogue is, was there an ancient advanced human society? Were there people on Antarctica? At a minimum, dynastic peoples of any kind, Egyptians, Vikings, Romans, I don't care, fill in the blank, Greeks, Phoenicians, anything pre-dynastic. If you have Neolithic campfires, campsites, if you have humans anatomically correct in ice, or again, below the ice in ground, we're talking about rewriting the human history. There are so many paper houses about our history, and there are so many things that don't add up, right? Including the Paracas, the elongated skull people all over the earth that every university refused to test. And now we have this location, Antarctica, that is open to the public. It's a matter of adventuring there and saying, here are the questions we were going to try to answer. Yeah, we would like to see, if we bring a geologist, of course we're going to bring a geologist, but yeah, what we'd like to see if there's any indications that this pyramid is actually a pyramid. Yes, well, we need geologists for that, not archaeologists. I mean, we need archaeologists, but we need ones that take their craft seriously. We don't need magical anthropologists that make up stories about societies from like a finger bone. I'm so sick of that. I'm so sick of hearing somebody tell me all about the ritualistic practices because they found a single bone and suddenly they know an entire society and its history. That just drives me nuts.
This is what I enjoy about you, Jared, because you are all about the evidence and you are all about the, well, prove it or I'll go and look for myself. So if you don't mind, let's move on again, if that's all right with you, Jared.
Yeah, keep it moving.
Okay, I've read that in the Amazon rainforest, relatively recently, an amazing amount of buildings and pyramids have been discovered using, I think it's LiDAR. In fact, if you can explain that as well, using LiDAR. In fact, the amount of architectural anomalies found now forces us to turn away from the idea of simple jungle dwellers of the past to a sophisticated society that lived in that great expanse in cities. Are you with me or against me on that?
Oh, that's a solid, without a doubt, that the even prior to LiDAR, it's light detection and ranging. The idea is to use lasers that can be uninterrupted by foliage and organic material and just detect the soil and detect the under the mounds of dirt, the existence of these large structures or any kind of structure, what's below the canopies of trees or tropics of varieties of plants. And in this case, it started with the big news of Guatemala and them saying, we found 60,000 buildings, including hundreds of pyramids. And the irony is that and that one I write about, that one I include in the book, and you have Guatemalan archaeologists saying from Tikal saying, listen, up until now, the big joke, and he doesn't say this, so I'm paraphrasing, I'm interpreting this part, which is paraphrasing what he basically says was, it was thought that South America was where civilization went to die. And his inference from that, so my interpretation of that, and I think what he's referring to is that modern, and by the way, Western, British, American archaeology said, oh, well, those silly people in South and Central and North America, all those indigenous, they all came across a land bridge. They dragged their knuckles from the Bering Straits and they built up all of Latin and Central and North America, the Clovis people. They made everything in the last 12,500 years. Or whatever. And that nothing else existed. And right up to the point where they won't dig below a certain layer of the ground. It's lunacy. At this point, it's a joke. And so for those traditionalists out there that are trying to protect their academic records. It's just lunacy. But then
why? Sorry, Jared. Just back up a minute. Sorry. Why won't they dig below a certain level? What's that? Is that a technical issue or something?
Because nothing's supposed to be there.
Oh, carry on. Sorry, Gary. You cleared that one up. Thank you.
You can't. Like, you can't believe it. Like, you can't believe, like, anyone with the most common sense. And yet they would rather protect their careers, their peer work. Like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. We both wrote a paper we like. And it's like, get up behind your desk, you lazy asses, and go do the work. And it's like, and here's the other problem is that people say, well, go to bedrock. Well, bedrock's not often bedrock. A lot of times when people dig through soft soils, sands, clays, fill in the blank, all the above, they get down to a hard layer, even a slate, and they go, well, there's nothing below here because this layer is 40,000, 100,000, a million years old. And they're like, well, we're not going to find anything. Well, we found stuff in coal deposits that indicate anatomically correct humans from 60 million years ago. So, and that's an extreme, that's not even it's extreme antiquity, but I'm saying that there are layers of hardened sandstone and there's layers of what appears to be, what could be the lowest layer of a dynastic or a indigenous people where they say, well, the Clovis didn't go below this, so they don't excavate, yet you dig deeper and now you're back to mastodon or earlier bones, and then you're finding something else. And so they're not doing it. And in this particular case, so here's the irony. We all, of course, dating myself, we get told as a kid that the rainforest is going to be deforested and we're all going to die and everything's going to turn to desert and everything's horrible. And there's all these pharmaceutical drugs that we're not going to have access to because the earth is going to be destroyed because there's going to be no rainforest. And so in the early 90s,
I'm glad we got that cleared up. Carry on.
Right. And so now there was this worry that, well, and so this was another perspective, and this again goes to our hubris of the human species, which was from the beginning, the rainforest is a virgin forest because again, everybody came to South America through the Bering, through the land bridge and through Canada and through America and through Central America. Everything built in this entire side of the world was built in the last 12,000 years, according to general academia. And then you get down, and again, more importantly, then these vast jungles to Brazil, getting to it, are all virgin. Now they start, of course, it's like, well, crap, we can use these trees, and we also want to start farming, so they start clearing trees, and by the statistics I was given when I was a kid, the rainforest shouldn't have any trees left, actually. But side note, so for now, they start clearing trees and magic. They start finding and they start airing like, oh, isn't this curious? Isn't this a mystery? There's this giant, massive human earthwork that indicates there was a massive town, village, and city here. Oh, and here's another one. And here's another one. And here's a giant geoglyph. And it's not in Nazca in Peru. It's underneath what was, in quotes, a virgin rainforest. That in itself, along with something I talked about from the beginning, engineered soil. You can't have, because the Brazilian rainforest is considered a wet desert. It's not, the soil didn't have a consistency without man doing either slash and burn or creating compost. It was supposed to not be growing soil, despite all the rich vegetation and everything, but it wasn't good for farming. But then we find this engineered ancient soil called terra preta, which also turns up in northern South America. It ends up in Central America. It's all the damn over. But that aside, they start clearing rainforests. They start finding towns, but these are primitive towns. These are towns that are easily built by any common-sensed human being that knows how to stack a stone in a pile, create defensive walls. You can have a pretty rudimentary but yet comfortable and advanced ancient simplex society. But to build with megalithic construction with polygonal earthquake, keystone cutted polygonal blocks, that's a different animal. And the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Olmecs, the Toltecs, the the various dynastic romanticized / everything we know about from colonization, that group, well, those people came across what appears to be, like at Machu Picchu and Ollantaytambo and Sacsayhuaman and Tiwanaku and Teotihuacan, all from Central America all the way to South America. There are large megalithic stoneworks mixed in with these mud bricks and simple buildings, simple constructions. And it appears, just like the Egyptians, that clearly maybe pre-Younger Dryas or post-Younger Dryas, people came across and started mimicking and rebuilding on the... And I have it all over notaliens.com. I have lots of photos in my member area of rebuilt Mayan, Aztec stuff. And you can find lots of it on the internet too. But the point is, and I go into great discussions with it with archaeologist Jennifer Deo, but here we are in Brazil after barely 2 years ago, the LiDAR scans of it was a 5,000, it's basically a 5,000 mile rectangular shaped scanning area of Guatemala, and they're looking for ancient ruins. Now, you got these mysteries, these one-up. That's how academia disqualifies or gaslights, or I love the straw argument, which is where they just jump to, well, what, you think aliens did it? And they never take the data. They always, this is something to watch for. If you're listening to someone who's just trying to discredit the person talking about it, they're not, I'm over the dialogue of, well, we're concerned with the person presenting versus the data itself. It's like bullocks. I'm just over it.
Yeah.
I'm just over it.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. I think that's a very saying aliens. Maybe it's aliens. I think that's a very unacademic, unintelligent, and lazy answer. If not from you, I'm just talking about the television program which was running back in the day when I had a television before I threw it out the door. So if you can just tell me, because I've heard yourself and other researchers that this area alone could have potentially had not hundreds, not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but millions of residents. Really? I mean, I thought these were the gentle rainforest people. They weren't able to have these massive constructions and these pyramids which were allegedly aligned to the cardinal points. Millions of people, Jared. Did I hear that right on one of your shows? I think you were co-hosting with Michael at the time, where you said potentially there could have been millions of people there.
Yeah, that was what so they released the LiDAR scans, and even National Geographic, I mean, kudos for stepping up, but you have this archaeologist from Tikal who says, you have to rethink, everyone has to rethink South and Central America as to not a place where civilizations went to die, but where civilizations started. And one of the other quotes was that we could safely assume, now this is just from the Tikal University's research for that Guatemalan LiDAR scans, they said, and this is Central America, and this is only 800 square miles of a 5,000 square mile scan. They said we could safely estimate 15 to 20 million people. And
wow,
here's the thing, right? No, but that's standard academia. They don't say anything. It's kind of like homes in America, when they're assessed for taxes, are assessed at 20 to 30% below their market value. Like no one pays taxes. Nobody pays property taxes on their true value. It's usually 20 to even 40% below is what the government collects. So it's interesting to me when a standard academic model and a standard in an organization like the National Geographic, when they're willing to publicly state it's 15 to 20 million people, and that's just from what they're seeing from those 40 to 60,000 buildings that they're identifying with superhighways, that, again, the conquistadors, when they went to Central and when they went to South America, they were seeing cities with hundreds of thousands of people. That was in dynastic times. That was in the colonialization. That was in the earliest stages of conquistadors doing their stuff. But pre that period, this is what's exciting about these LiDAR scans and Brazil and then the newest stuff. We are not only going to see a continued it's absolute revolution in archaeology, in the paradigm shifts, and we can't wait. The big joke being, archaeology changes at the rate of the death. The opinions change at the rate of the death of one archaeologist at a time. I'm not going to wait. Neither are any of the alternative researchers. We're not going to wait for when you're literally looking at a 747 for you to stop calling it the blinky board. It's a 747. Those that want to jump on board and do the research, those that want to go do the work, we have to do it. And I think it's on podcasters like ourselves, you, me, and on researchers to and I think it's exciting to throw out to, I'm not asking for any money. I'm just saying that it's up to everyone out there listening that this is our history. And it affects your religion. It affects your paradigms in the future. I believe there's technology in the ground that we can value and research and recover and re-engineer. But to get to it, not only do we all need to be aware of it, but there are different ways to participate. Some of it is financial. Some of it is like, look, it's not our job to convince schools that are selling people on $300,000, $200,000 degrees to tell you that the Clovis came first and that there's no modern humans, blah, blah, blah. I can't wait for Göbekli Tepes to keep coming up and then for them to not be excavated for 50 years at a shot. It's time to take this more seriously, and that revolution is coming, I think, particularly with shows like yours, mine, the work we're doing, and getting out there and doing it. And some of it isn't like the Kincaid thing. I'm not jumping out there to prove Kincaid wrong or right. I'm going out because I think there are rock cut ruins, and let's just get a sliver of something that could be out there and get some light on it. And then when we come to South America, I'm planning I have 3 major trips. Ironically, the Grand Canyon's economical. I'll be doing some work in America's Stonehenge after Dennis Stone and I meet when I'm there doing a live lecture at the end of May 1st at the end of the month. But then also, which is available virtually, but then also it's South America. And Jennifer Deo and I are planning and have been working even longer. It's not like you can wing it and grab a shovel and just hop on a plane and go anywhere and do anything. Don't get me wrong, but we've been planning for over 6 months to go to South America, and that's very, very far along. And the work there, again, is to work on how ancient are these megalithic constructions, something that no one was interested in. They're interested in the mummies. They're not interested in proving that these cymatic polygonal blocks are standing on highly complex constructions of foundational pre-compactions and materials that we literally have no eyes on. And first and foremost is in proving out the complexity of these ancient constructions. So as Brazil and everywhere, I believe, in South America, and this is my point about America, is that America's looked to, it's called the New World, which is a joke because it might be one of the most forgotten, along with, I think, the Mongolian areas and Siberia's and Eastern European and, of course, Northern Libya. There are a number of areas that are mistaken as being not as relevant. We have such a hard set in believing that the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, and then we jump around the continents and we can name them all off, that we think we have this very foundational picture of where the oldest societies are, when in reality, they're just the last societies we actually remember.
Keeping the theme, I've also read recently of an 8-mile long wall, also in the Amazon jungle, that is around 50 feet high, and it's covered in paintings. The article states that the artwork was created by some of the first, air quotes, humans in the Amazon around 12,500 years ago. I didn't mean to irritate you with that statement. I'm just going by the facts here. To that latter part, I will. Yeah, right, exactly. To that latter part, I will add, But I'm intrigued as to the possibility of a record of the technology that these people may have had before the deluge around that time. Thoughts on that one, please, Jared?
So it's all along, one of my main hypotheses is that there's always been, whether benevolent or indifferent, more technology, more advanced humans have always had tribes and people around them that weren't just doing anything really beyond mimicking or developing their own world, but they were developing independent of more advanced societies. So if you have 8 or 12 miles of cave paintings or wall, like they go up that particular wall when it was found. It's crazy because some of it goes up over 40 feet to like 60 feet. So it's not only long, it's really tall. And you got to wonder, we think a lot of it may be significant, but maybe they let the kids paint on the first 4 feet and then they did all their hard work up above, But I do think it's interesting in that it's listening for those that are passionate about truth and about learning their history, our history, the world's history. You have to ignore every single time somebody says it's the first, it's the oldest, it's the only, oh, it's a mystery, or isn't that an out of place, out of time, fascinating thing? And so in the case of this wall, there are so many things in South and Central America that are more ancient. The National Geographic, one of my favorite is to talk about a volcano that had covered an abandoned pyramid. The pyramid had 34 feet of soil on it. It was then covered in a 15 or 7 or 8 mile or 15 mile wide lava flow. It was rediscovered and published in a 1922 National Geographic, which ironically I have within arm's reach, which was not planned for this interview. But I bring it up in my book in that this is a pyramid that was abandoned and would have only been functional at a minimum. The lava flow was 8 to 12,000 years ago. And indigenous peoples in this area had no record of it in Mexico. And what's a pyramid that's predating Stonehenge? And what is it doing abandoned with 34 feet of soil on it, and then a lava flow, and then more soil? How long ago was that pyramid built? How much past the Younger Dryas? I'm trying to shine a bigger light on the explosion, the volcanic work about 75,000 years ago may have been really the end or the capstone on a global society. But here we are with Hueyatlaco, Mexico, is another example, which is Michael Cremo has been talking about for over 30 years. Virginia Steen McIntyre, the geologist, finds, well, she's sent there by archaeologists that find a site that indicates that there are people that were cavemen there, and they assumed they were primitive monkey people. I'm just going to say that because there's an order to things, and there was definitely no anatomically correct humans. Well, they explore the site, and they realize that this is an anatomically correct human site, that for sure it is not caveman, Denisovan, Neanderthal, fill in the blank. So they say, okay, well, this is modern anatomically correct humans. So here she is with 9 geologists, and they date the site based on the geology, not their anthropological feel-good opinion about a finger bone and about, well, this is how we feel these people lived and when they lived. No, the geological evidence indicated that at a minimum, the site, which has in further been proven to be true, is at least 275,000 years old. This is Hueyatlaco, Mexico. It's over 275,000. The latest work that I've heard from Michael Cremo of the paleoanthropologists that have picked up the work, that is between 333 to over 500,000 years old. Anatomically correct humans had a campfire in North Mexico and were hanging out 330 to 500,000 years ago. So, were they the first? Were they the only ones? Were they just the explorers? No, they were just there. But that doesn't add up with 12,000 years ago. It's just a joke. So, again, becoming a fossil is the exception to the rule. Becoming part of the historical record and surviving over long epochs of time is it's rare. And so it's not because they don't exist that they do. It's that we keep finding these slivers of evidences, but they're not slivers and taken as a whole. It's not, oh, here's a random 200,000-year-old thing and another. No, it's like all the 300, 200, 150, 1 million. There's so many individual items that add up to say there's clearly a civilization present in this time frame. And just like today with the 150 plus tribes around the planet, it would be really easy to find some of their simple tools and say, oh, there's an Eolithic, Neolithic society that lives here, and based on their campfire, they had this, and they used tools, and they carved at bone, and from these remnants, it's clear that they were hunter-gatherer. Meanwhile, we got an Apple store that turns to dust. It's just a fact.
I would say that was it Virginia Steen McIntyre? She was almost accused of heresy, and to my understanding, her career was all but left in tatters. And this actually has a point, because something you said earlier about the alternative community, I would replace people like yourself, alternative, with free thinking, honest and open-minded, and she seems to be one of those very first people that didn't adhere to the dogma, and she suffered for it, Jared.
Yeah, there was another. Michael Cremo talks extensively about another Canadian researcher, and they hung his ass out to dry. And it's so sad. It's such a shame. And if anything, it's, some people like to point out the guy. This is the saddest thing. The doctor who said that we should wash our hands when delivering babies, and that it would cut down on infections and death if you as a doctor would wash your hands before helping deliver a baby. Well, it was so heretic to say that. He ended up they discredited him, they institutionalized him, and they essentially killed him in that institution within days or weeks. So he ended up basically discredited and essentially murdered for suggesting to the powers that be that just washing your hands would be a good thing. I mean, we have books in Minnesota about the institutions that handle the mentally and physically handicapped, where they essentially were thrown in rooms and they were treated worse than you can possibly fathom in the worst horrific nightmare movie you could ever think of. And they were left there to die. And this was activity going on almost up into the 80s, the 1980s. And we have a barbaric record of not only not accepting, like the idea of having, again, people think of a hospital setting as being a clean place. Do you know how long it took for them to figure out, for someone to accept that you need to have a medical filtration central air system that filters the bacteria out of the air, because otherwise guy in room A infects girl in room 27 away from them from an open wound from a surgical procedure, because the common air being breathed by everyone was exposing other patients, and people were dying in hospitals because they didn't sort out the airflow system, which, mind you, is still not amazing. And that's a hint for some other crap that everyone's been thinking about when you go to your big box retailer. But at this current time, just getting people on every modern advance, commonsensical things like washing hands to deliver a baby. This is not stuff I'm talking about from the 1400s. This is modern medical stuff that the resistance into the 1900s is disgusting and ignorant. It's never openly meant. It's never like a movie where, like, there's a good guy, there's a bad guy. Oh, bad guy got revealed, good guy wins. That's not what it is. Bad guys get away with, bad people, bad ideas, bad science. They get away with it. And not only do they get away with it, it gets corrected long after they're gone, and they get to walk around like they've done no wrong. And it just continues. This perpetual lava flow of slow ignorance is perpetuated versus embracing and speeding with the times. The best example I have is, look at technology. The greatest Unix, as in the program that everybody is familiar with, Unix, Microsoft, Dell Computing, those are just a couple. Every single one of those owners, they're dropouts. They're dropouts from college. And I can tell you right now, in the world of technology, you want to meet someone who's super brilliant and really advanced with computing, you're going to meet either a dropout or someone who's self-taught and they know what they know by the time they're 17, 18, 19, 20. If they know what they know, Elon Musk, started PayPal. The reality is that truly brilliant people uh, and it's not just brilliant, self-motivated. You do not wait for particularly a collegiate institution to tell you what to know. They're self-taught. And if we are going to allow the archaeological world, essentially it is, if the technological world was where the archaeological world is, we might as well be in barely horse and buggies.
Well,
That's
to
where we
me,
be technologically.
to me, science should be, and to my understanding, is, or at least in the Slick podcast world, is the ability to question and have open doors on all possibilities, not to build stone walls, to dress up as a Edwardian gentleman and shout poppycock at something that you don't understand. Because as a scientist, you should really embrace that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, it's just it's so, at this point, for you and I to shine lights and discuss all this is the, I don't know if they until now, there's a shame. There's this way that they've been able to sit like they're on a cloud and look down and say, you two are having a stupid, silly conversation. You mean nothing. Well, there are too many people literally taking the cruise ship and snapping an average photo of a high technology, unrepeatable, uncopyable, absolutely advanced piece of stonework or vase or something. And they're saying, oh yeah, you know, they pounded this out. And it's like, your very explanation is asinine. And before they could shut us all up, they can't do it anymore. It's ludicrous. It's like I just told you, it's that your very reaction is the capstone on all of this. When I told you, when you asked, why don't they dig deeper? Well, because nothing's supposed to be there. And you
Oh dear. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
That's
how can they take themselves?
I know. Let's just move on, because I'm just, yeah. Let's just move on a little bit. Okay. In our last interview together, we briefly discussed one of the topics covered in your book. It's not aliens, worse, it's us. That of Terra Preta and its unique properties. Now, I've thought about this until my brain hurts. So if you don't want to answer it and say, Simon, you're too way out there, I'd understand. So my question is, in your opinion, could the crystalline structures of the polygonal constructions of Sacsayhuaman, for example, have acted as an interface and the Terra Preta as a conduit, for want of a better word, in the relay of information around the planet, taking into account your hypothesis on a potentially much higher human interaction with consciousness back then?
As far as consciousness in reference to the, what else have you been thinking? I'm curious, because I know you've been thinking.
Yeah, can you tell? So you were talking that at the moment maybe our potential, our minds are in safe mode, but way back then with the Terra Preta, I'm trying to connect the dots here. The Terra Preta being almost a smart soil, an intelligent soil. And I'd like you to, I know in our last interview I kept asking you about it, but it's something, and it's been inspired by you. You know, we're looking at the jar, we're looking at the huge pyramid, but nobody's looking on the ground. And this fascinates me, Terra Preta. So being a smart soil, okay, could be self-replicating, piezoelectric and filter heavy metals and stuff like that. And also the crystalline structure of the very granite. And take into account the human consciousness. Maybe we had a link, as you said, with the plants, the trees, the animals. Could, rather than the laptop, like you and I now are talking on a third party, we're able to talk. Could that maybe have been a possibility back then? Lay hands on the structure, connected to the Terra Preta. I can talk to the SLK podcast way back when. Do you kind of know where I'm coming from, or shall I just stop and ask another question?
Yeah. No. It's exactly dead on, and trying to get people to understand just the idea that. No, it's dead on. You're exactly right. The people think that it would just be, again, if you go, in my case, I actually, it's so funny, before I ever thought about writing the book. And I remember about a decade ago that there was, I was learning about Mark Sisson's book, The Primal Blueprint, and learning to go, why eat paleo? Why, how are we designed, or what seems to make the best sense? The terms positive gene expression were new. and it's so crazy that so many of the early researchers in paleo were saying things that are now way more mainstream. But at the time, I'm like, okay, well, I need highly nutritious. At the time they were talking about tomatoes being grown in Florida, and that's sand. It's like, how many nutrients are in sand? And I'm like, I don't think a lot. And then I had looked, what's the most nutritious soil? And I had caught wind of a potting soil that you could get that was, it wasn't supposed to be exported, that I had heard about terra preta, but I thought it was some trendy paleo term, ironically, that it was, I didn't realize that, when they say it's the richest growing soil by 100 times and it has all these minerals and nutrients and so I thought that was interesting. But then why, if you were a society that had 80 or 90 or 100% plus consciousness, when we look at, there are some very, very, very interesting things on the magnetic fronts of humanity, which means that your aura, and I'm not talking woo-woo, I'm talking your actual magnetic given frequency aurora, that there is a good, not only connection to a collective human consciousness, that there is an actual aurora directly around the human body that is the photograph for it is called the Korinne photograph and Korinne photography. And there are very different methods to do this. There is solid research that it can indicate diseases, etc. But this magnetic aurora would also connect to, exactly just like going barefoot, right to this soil. And we think of the soil as something to grow in. We think of black earth, or terra preta is black soil, and it is growing soil. But we are also discounting the fact that there are other soils or sands mixes that are artificial, that they're mixes because they are meant to have those piezoelectric electromagnetic properties to communicate, receive a signal. That you could look at it as a giant earth circuit that either through direct connecting or wirelessly, like you said, you could touch a building, but the building itself may directly receive maybe a wave or frequency, and then it could communicate or hop or continue or re-amplify and directly end up in your brain. I mean, is that truly part of the function of the pineal gland? Is there a reason it appears to have ocular nerves? Is there a reason that the pineal gland appears so odd as the way it does? And are those remnants in our written histories, the idea of the third eye is maybe the final dumbification of what was once a biological cell phone, biological direct communication?
That makes me feel so much better, because I thought you might have said, just ask me another. Let's talk the moon and Mars. There are lots of conspiracies over these two astral bodies, and the one in particular that I'd like to discuss first is Mars. Case in point, lots of people believe nothing NASA says or now publishes for one alleged reason or another, and put forward arguments as why we shouldn't believe what that particular company line is. Yet, the laughable point I can't get my head around is any, and I'll say that again, any pictures from Mars that are out there published by NASA are then used by a lot of these same people to spin a whole pre-Mars civilization theory and are offered as proof of pre-civilization. What makes the pictures of Mars more authentic than those of the moon landings? What are your thoughts on that? Or am I being unfair or missing something there, Jared?
It's such a great subject, and the questions are exactly, I mean, again, you're singing to the choir. It's exactly those questions are evidences that say, okay, look, the moon landings are real, they weren't real. You can't fly beyond the radiation belt around the Earth, and we'll never, and the moon is within it. We can get to the moon, but we can't go further, and we're trapped, or we're in a hologram. There's all these different theories. I think the moon is real. It's likely we've been there, and it is also very possible, if we're looking at ancient advanced humans, I think it's very, very likely that either, I don't know, because we're not doing Mars archaeology right now. I mean, if you want to get me in a sci-fi novel, I'll tell you right now, there's nothing better than sci-fi and intergalactic archaeology. I mean, you spin a good yarn, then that's something I'm way into. It's like the idea of fallen, in a galaxy far, far away and a long time ago. The idea of Mars either being an origin planet or a planet that we reached out and settled, and quite in typical human fashion and or despite advances, did they implode sociologically? Was it planetary disruptions? Was it scientific? Was it war? Was it a combination of those disasters? Or worse, at some point were we visited by life forms outside of this galaxy or outside of this solar system, and did we fight? And are they the reason Mars got completely annihilated and the Earth was, left in ruins? And is it possible that it's vice versa? That Mars was the origin and Earth was a secondary planet? Or, we don't have those answers. And like you said, my personal frustration is we're scouring over what we're told are pictures of Mars, that they are authentic. And so everyone's looking at them and going, well, this photo looks scrubbed, and it does. And this photo over here looks scrubbed, and it does, because I've gone over that with Mary Joyce and, Cashiers, her website, Cashiers Over Mars. Is it? Why am I blanking on that? Let me look it up here quick.
Okay. While you look that up, let me just add to that. My point is, which I know you get, and I'll be quiet, but it might be a scrubbed picture, but it doesn't prove it's a scrubbed picture of Mars. But certain people, I'm not trying to belittle them here, are building big careers and writing books and doing the whole circuit on pictures that they cannot possibly authenticate. I'm not trying to poo-poo them. I'm just saying, if you're not believing the pictures of the moon, what makes you think these pictures are authentic? Okay, over to you, Jared. I just wanted to put that in again.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are speaking from we're not even in the bleachers. It's like we're in a car talking about going to a show that we don't even know is going to be put on. I mean, we see the launches. People go to the launches. There's definitely SpaceX. There's definitely NASA. There's definitely satellites. I mean, we're speaking on them right now. So we know that there is space travel. We know that there's a science for it. But do we have any direct evidences? If we are going to be very bleak in our understanding, we have to either trust that the spaceship that we saw launch, that the satellite we saw launch, that the data we're being given is true and real, and that it's going to Mars, and that we are looking at that data, and that either how likely is it that every single university and collegiate institution and every single scientific organization on Earth is in collusion to say, let's make sure we, let every student and every interested party know that we actually didn't go to Mars? It just seems crazy. It's just, that is one hell of a thing to do, in which case we have a lot of other things to worry about. So I do think, in the likelihood that we are actually there and that we are getting these photographs, I mean, I am very frustrated, like you, and I think a lot of people, I am very frustrated over the fact that there is no way you and I are seeing crapola from that planet without it going through, like, I bet there's some guy at the bottom of the chain who's like, I'm classifying this photo just because I can. And so there is no way we are getting raw or live footage from Mars. No way. For exactly those reasons. Common sense. You don't need an other life form, or like worse, you don't need to see, 200 million BC USA astronaut skeletons on the planet. You don't need to see, the sun never sets on the galactic British Empire, and, the ruins of former explorers, 10 million years ago, and their entire colony and what's left of their buildings. There is no way we are going to see that, or, oh, look, there's the matching pyramid structures of the Giza Plateau, only they're not broken down and there seems to be people scurrying around. Why on earth would we ever allow that to be a live feed? I don't know what people are thinking. It's just
No, but
there's
I have to throw in. Sorry for interrupting. I have to throw in that I am in no way taking away anything from, in my personal opinion, the brave act from Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. I'm not taking that away. I'm in no doubt that they went to the moon. Whatever they found, or whether it's just a simple case of the film of their camera dissolved and they had to do other pictures. But I am not going to even entertain the idea that those three guys and people that have followed them haven't gone into space. To me, that's as ridiculous as what's going on in the world at the moment that we're not going to touch on. Because I can't say COVID or vaccine, obviously. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that in. But the whole, these are pictures of that, and these are pictures of that, and there's a civilization. I am very much with you. Because if they suddenly said, this is definitely the origins of our species, one, society might fall apart, but B, they'd have no other titillization, is that the word? Titillization to dangle in front of us and keep us guessing while the left hand is doing something completely different.
Yeah, it's just whatever we're getting, and again, all the power. If you have an authenticated photo from Mars and you feel that, like Google Earth, I mean, you can. I mean, I tell everyone If the lesson I've learned in the time I spent just on my first book, screenshot. If you see something and you're like, oh, that's fascinating, screenshot it, because there's a good chance the next time you go, if it's not something that goes with the narrative, whatever it is, I don't even care if it has to do with sports. If it does not follow, or football, if it doesn't follow the narrative, and you're like, well, that seems very factual, very grounded. It's not what I know. It's not what I remember. And I'll just get back to it later. Do not assume it's going to be there. If there is some information that didn't get pulled from the internet, the reality is screenshot it. So if you got people that are saying, hey, look, here's a shot of Mars, and it looks like a tunnel or a bunker or a construction, and then here's the shot of the same Mars photo now, and it's all blurred out. Well, if that's true and it really is blurred out, we can go to the site and go, well, you look like you have a photo that wasn't blurred. And if anyone else can corroborate that they had it too before it was blurred, just like Google Earth, where there's a lot of odd stuff underwater that, like Sylvia Ivanova, the New Earth lady, she's done a ton of stuff where, this is early on, this is like 7 years old now, but there was stuff where it's like, hey, look at this coastline here, and now look at Google Earth, and now it's gone. And it's like, that is some odd stuff where, and again, I don't want to expose any country's military, that may be partly it's that. But I do think a lot of it, I think, is just ancient ruins that shouldn't be underwater or where we're finding them. And so they get scrubbed because this entire weak-ass narrative of where we've come from and whom we are is just falling apart. And of course, it freaks people out. I mean, the idea that we were on Mars already. There's a lot of people in a lot of organizations and religions that their belief system falls apart if we are not the only planet in the world, in the world of the universe. If we're not central to being the only highly intelligent, you're not even supposed to find a bacteria off the planet. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, it was explained to me that if we found one living organism outside of Earth, it would disprove the Bible. And that is enough for some people, for some gnashing of teeth.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I still think that a majority of people would embrace and probably say en masse, yeah, I kind of knew that. Okay, so moving along again, if that's okay with you, I'd like to ask you now about deserts. And I won't talk about entrees to a good meal, but the areas of the planet that you suggest may be the result of weapons of mass destruction or deliberately put there.
Deliberately put?
As in deliberately created either by a weapon of mass destruction. Deserts. So I've heard you talk about deserts before. Some of them are quite and over to you.
Yeah, as far as like if we're ever going to find any, or if we're Like, I mean, there's the stories of like the Ark of the Covenant being a leftover ancient high technology weapon, or misused high piece of technology as a weapon, stuff like that.
Yeah, and maybe that's the result of why that desert happens to be there.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm excited about what was just found kind of in your neck of the woods off for Doggerland. Maybe not all the way to Scotland, but somewhere between France and England, they have started exploring and testing the sedimentary remains underwater, under salt water, under oceanic water, to identify the flora and fauna of Doggerland, which was as early as 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. Good portions of it were above water, and if you hit 8,000 years ago, a lot of everything from Scotland to France were, well, one, they were connected, and two, this represents a massive amount of land and coastal areas where a lot of people like to live that no longer exist. And so if you have nanoarchaeology, and in this case sedimentary archaeology, looking and able to dissect, despite the destructive force of salt water, the flora and fauna of Doggerland, if we started, we just look at these big deserts and we shrug our shoulders and go, no gold, no mummies, no ruins. Well, no ruins with gold, so screw it, leave it, let them run, let them turn, let them spin. But kind of like dealing with core and foundational structural components of megalithic structures, whether platforms or polygonal walls or pyramids, once we start looking at the structural advancements to create those foundations, and if we start applying that not just to growing soils like or piezoelectric dirts, if we start looking at these sands and we start doing it at layers, they talk about how quickly sand dunes move and shift in the winds. But if we start getting low enough, I don't know if we have to go 100 feet or 200 feet or 100 meters, and if we get to a layer of sand that hasn't shifted, how much of that sand will provide at the granular level, just like the research that they're doing for Doggerland? How exciting would it be is if we can prove out that there's terra preta in the desert areas of all of North Africa, that there's sedimentary remains of flora and fauna and of what appears to be engineered components of a seismic metamaterial and that would be like anywhere from a nanostructure to like giant stone spheres. What if the remnants of those buildings, plastics, literally granules that indicate that we really are able to rebuild societies that have been lost to us, not in chunks and boulders and pushed over mud-strewn buildings, but what if we're able to identify really what appears to be a significant layer of society, whether it be their soils or it be the actual dusted remnants of constructions. I think they're laying in the sands in these deserts that no one's been interested in other than crossing.
My next question, this is definitely a rope-a-dope question. I gave you a rope-a-dope question last time. I don't know if you remember it. If you could go back to any time, when would you go, or to when you would go, where would you go and why? So this is kind of a bit of a rope-a-dope question. So I'm just going to ask it, as I value your answers and the candor in which you answer them. So we'll just start. Do you think our society is heading in the right direction to repeat possible past mistakes, such as in prehistory, the destruction of maybe the Maya or the Aztecs or something? And if so, if it was up to you now, what would you do to right the wrongs? And I'm talking about where we are right now in the world. Bit of a heavy one, Jared, but I just thought I'd throw it out, mate.
All the lonely people, where do they all come from, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So I've been a little concerned in general that, when we talk, hey, humans are about 10 to 15% conscious, and what are the net results of that right now? And I think, like you said, there's things we can't talk about, but You can literally throw science out the door and turn the universe back into witchcraft. You can literally ignore of these crazy, archaic, foundational universities. I mean, there is significant science that could be easily put right out there to say that what we're going through right now is absolutely ludicrous. And yet, look at the religion and the how is it that at our level of consciousness we can discern so little and our wisdom be so low? And so partially, I guess, part of the answer is it's difficult to think of the technology that we're in possession of and us being less conscious than we are currently, because that's migraine creating. And then how do we, where can we go, or what's the hope for humanity? I do think there are individuals and groups that are, I think there's one benefit. Like I said, I do think that there's something attached to the amount of humanity on the planet. I do believe that collective human consciousness, that collective RAM of humanity is what helps open us back up to our higher consciousness and our higher selves. And there's a lot of science in that we could discuss for like 10 other episodes, or, we can't get into it now. But what I would say is that it's important that we don't murder each other off the planet, but it's also important we don't let particular units of humanity ritualistically kill, murder, maim, or mutilate humans, which is absolutely unacceptable, there are still some practices on this planet that are absolutely medieval. They should not exist, and every human life needs to be respected and left alone. And, you can pretend all you want in your own home, what's important to you, but you don't have a right to, even if it's your own child, you do not have a right to mutilate them or kill them for not believing in what you believe in. It's just absurd that that's even a thing right now. So we have a long way to go in that area. But as far as what brings us, what elevates us collectively, individually, people will reach various levels of consciousness and do. I think there's no reach a level and stay there. I think we peak and we fall, and I don't, and we even do it collectively. But I do think that there's enough individual strands to pull it out of what is a complete, utter, absolute, makes no sense mess. But it's not the momentum to, for instance, feed everyone. There's literally no reason not to feed everyone on the planet. Literally no reason. None. Zero. America alone makes enough food. And yet we don't do it. And it's bizarre. It's very, that there are, we could slip down the rabbit hole of gray states and the New World Order and all that. But the reality is that we have a very topsy-turvy, the approach is dangerous because those same organizations, I don't think they realize that the collective human consciousness is something they need. I think that there is some validity in people thinking that, well, we can eliminate 30 or 40% of the population, we'd be way better off. In fact, it should be less, and we'll go back to having slaves. And are you insane? Because I don't think you understand that it's not that one person came up with one equation and then another equation. It's the collective human spectrum of total human consciousness that is allowing the breakthroughs, I think, again, in nanotechnology, in the spectrums of human energy. You name the field, whether it's biology or genetic sciences and energy sciences, all of it has to do with collective human consciousness. So that is something that's difficult to be patient with when you and I could have a conversation, well, this is right and that's wrong, and we can just, you and I, if we're in charge, we can eliminate these 10 things and we already know we're living in a better world. That's unfortunately just not how things execute. And so how do we live through, each of us individually? I think the question is, how do we each live knowing some things are right and some things are wrong, and how do we collectively get along until we can get more people doing it, not by agreement one way, but agree that we can all be different, but in a way that we are mentally reachieving some of these inactive abilities, like curing cancer by ourselves, consciously creating a brain entrainment that eliminates sickness, illness, reconnecting with the earth through that terraformed, engineered soil / the technology of the very ways in which we build. I mean, we live very primitively, and consciously we don't see how to live that way anymore. So I think it's a very complex, what you're asking is, it's very complex in a couple of different ways. And then when you think about our ancient times, I guess I used to think, just once and for all, for a long time, I quite childishly thought, okay, bring me back to the crucifixion, bring me back to the deepest story of Western knowledge and take me back in time, and I'm just going to prove it did or didn't happen. I'm over it. And then I realized that, well, I know based on everything that we find that the history of this planet is possibly been filled with anatomically correct humans for millions of years. And so the question is, what was the age to me, in my mind, the time I would go back to, is the height of this global, original, not just pyramid building, but megalithic building, engineered soil, terraforming society that I do think was a worldwide culture. And I do think was much more advanced than where we are now, because I do think the remnants of those people exist in what we now call UFOs. And they are not gone from this planet. So this isn't a history of us speculating on just the past. So many people, it's so much easier to believe that there's aliens here from somewhere else. And again, they give very easy answers. Well, it's because they don't look like us. And I've seen one and they don't look like us. Yeah, that's called genetic technology. You manipulate and change your genome to match your technology. And in this case, it has to do with their infrared displays or their waves and frequencies that they're running their machines on. There's a million different reasons to tweak. Again, we have Botox, folks. We have plastic surgery for a reason, but we don't look at it. Well, I know Elon Musk is, brain chipping monkeys and looking for human volunteers for you to get a brain chip. Terrifying. But the reality is that genetic designer babies, these are all things we're doing. So it's very hard for us to consider that we know that there are UFOs, and the idea that an advanced prior human civilization has always been on this planet, and they don't help us further than we help any given tribe in the desert or jungle. That it's not like we build a bunch of sheetrock castles and say, look, you guys don't have to live here anymore. Here's your dentist, here's your accountant, here's a car, get out of the jungle, shoo, you come visit. We don't do that. So is the explanation for their lack of contact as simple as that? Is it that we're actually not ready to understand how badly they screwed up in the past without us wanting to nuke half the planet, just trying to murder the last of them? I mean, I think those are good questions, but to get to those answers, we have to keep doing the LiDAR. We have to keep doing what what we've already revealed. We have to answer. We have to go back. We have to more openly discuss who's going to Antarctica and for what. Who's looking for the ancient forest that may be on the edge of an ancient megalithic mound that was primitive? Who's looking for the Vikings? Who's looking for the new coastline? What other maps of the Sea Kings match other maps of Antarctica? What are we finding for highly advanced ruins? Do we find pyramids? Are they there in Antarctica? Are there other advanced engineered soils? Is there stuff underwater? What are we doing for all the coastal marine archaeology, which is so badass and represents so much of the earth that we think of? We look at this global map and we think this is the story of us. And it's always been the story of us, and it's not. It's Doggerland. It is Antarctica. It is many places. The Klerksdorp Spear, South Africa. We have so many things that indicate we were here, more advanced, more globally present, and that's a mystery in itself, but it does apply to our health and human services now, and I don't think we should wait for one more person to miserably die of a curable cancer, where the answer might just be in understanding the particular eigenvalue of a polygonal wall or a particular construction method, and really, really, really being honest about material sciences and how these constructions really function. And I feel like I sound like a complete downer. Do I sound like a complete...
No, no, you
depressing.
don't. No, you sound realistic. At the end of the day, I don't think doing the right thing is the company line here. I'm not being seditious. I'm just calling it the way it is. There are people in the world, whether they be prime ministers or presidents or politicians from all over the world, that could make a difference but choose not to. So that's also research for cancers, and all the while our society is based on money, how much money you can make. This will never change. Again, this is not sedition. This is just, like I said, this is the way I see it. And I've often thought to myself that a politician from any country, whether it be the United States or the United Kingdom or anywhere, should be paid no more than a health worker. Okay, so your cleaner or your nurse or your doctor, and I'm not talking the brain surgeon, because serving one's country should be reward enough. So you should be in it to serve the people and not yourself. But that's just my opinion. Jared, we're nearly at the top of the hour here, and I know I want you to tell us about your talk you're giving at America Stonehenge with Michael as well, and tell us about your book, where we can find it and where we can find you.
Yeah, so I'll be at America's Stonehenge in Salem, New Hampshire. I'll be walking the site if people want to come join. I'll be doing a 3-hour, it'll be a virtual event. You can buy a $10 ticket, or you can spend $29.95 and get free access to my member area on notaliens.com for 6 months. So you could have both, and then there'll be a Zoom link given that morning. But I will be at America's Stonehenge May 1st. Then, of course, notaliens.com. You can always see my schedule for your show and everything else here. And then my book is in the middle of a revision. There will be a new one coming out. So I can't believe I'm telling people this, but don't buy my book right now. And
Really?
yeah, don't buy it. Buy if anything, if you want to support right now, I would love for you to join notaliens.com. I have 2 chapters of my audio book there. I'm releasing more, so you can listen to me read the book, and I read it inclusively. I think this is important for people to hear. I think it's important when I say inclusively. There are people who may be enjoying an audiobook while they drive, but there are also people who can't see or difficulty, and so I not only read the story, but I also stop and read the captions and describe my photos in my book. So I think it's very important for people who don't read books, but also for people who can't see, to be able to be told the full story. And so my book is read inclusively to account for all of those circumstances, and I'm always open to suggestions. But if you'd like to, when you join notaliens.com, which is about a cost of an espresso a month, like $260 something by the time you pay for the year or whatever. Or I would just buy the ticket maybe for America's Stonehenge for that virtual thing, because you get 6 months on NetAliens, which I hand out private memberships for. But I have the audiobook in my member area, and the reality is that it'll get added to. And again, it has those inclusive descriptions. And then currently, Olav and I are going through a revision. There will be a new book, a new edition released here, hopefully in the next 3 weeks. There will be a new edition. And in that time also, of course, it's a little busy time period for me, because Jennifer Deo and I are working on the next 2 books. And so and they are very much not anthologies, but they are definitely complementary. It will be worth discussing those. And you can find me also, yes, I co-host Conflict Radio, and I'm on Everything Imaginable regularly, and Dark Hour Paranormal, and Michael Hall's Spaced Out Radio once a month. But I do think that we have an interview coming up with someone I speak about in my book, Dr. Gerald Pollack, who discovered a state of water that was unknown to humanity. And I think that's one of the greatest things on the planet to know about. That interview is coming up soon. Dr. Gerald Pollack will be on Conflict Radio. I talk about him in my book, and actually discovering a state of water. I mean, people think cold, hot, evaporated, frozen. No, this is a state of water, and it has to do with those piezoelectric magnetic properties. There's so many mysterious things that we're finally pulling back into science. But Dr. Gerald Pollack coined it easy water. And it is a state of water that exists in living organisms. And it's fascinating. And I go on about it in my book for a little bit. But I do think it's super important that physicists and researchers like Dr. Gerald Pollack get to be heard from. So I'm actually very excited about that. I guess I didn't think of that until now since you brought it up and you gave me the platform. Here we are.
Excellent. Jared, I've really appreciated your time today. And when you've concluded your... and be safe, by the way. When you've concluded your expedition to the Grand Canyon, I'd really, I'm trying to hog you all to myself. It's not a gay thing. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. I'd like you to come back onto... I know we got on well, but come on. No, I'd like you to come back onto the show and tell us how that went.
Yeah, well, I think it's important for all of us to keep connecting, especially for loyal listeners. The reality is that we will be doing it, technology permitting and reception permitting. We'll try to get some shows with some video in live from the sites when we do these expeditions. I do want people to be able to experience it while it's happening. So we'll try to do some stuff while we're actually at the different sites. My trip to America's Stonehenge isn't just a lecture and a tour. The reason I'm there again is Dennis Stone, the owners, generously, along with Nira. His interest is to continue excavation. It's a 106-acre site, 110 acres, somewhere in there. And only an acre and a half has been looked at. And there's so many mysteries and there's so many sites like it. But he has invited us to plan an archaeological work there. So we will be going over those plans and I'll be taking videos and et cetera. But then one day we will be back in the near future, hopefully this archaeological season. And the point is that whatever it is, it should be an opportunity for you and I to speak live to fans and do something that, because God knows just getting the technologies down for us to talk like this is hard enough. Why not do it live with video?
That's a great idea. I'm not offended, but there's one major expedition that you said you were going to do. I'm not offended if you can't remember what that is. Can you remember what that was, Jared? Jared, can you remember?
A lot of Scotch. A lot of Scotch. Was it Scotch?
Coming to Scotland, you mean?
You
haven't forgotten.
Okay.
Have you forgotten? You've forgotten, Jared, haven't you?
No, you know what? If I start talking about what we're actually doing, and again, it's up to some very sociocratic. A number of blah 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 can't get banned. Won't talk about it.
Yeah.
Carnival, right? So as soon as that gets lifted, then yes, there are so many. I think the heart of many, along with I think Malta, Sardinia, I believe the oldest ruins on this planet, besides the very limited remnants from Mongolia to America, North America to Scotland and England, despite the long histories that we know of those continents. Altogether, the Doggerland mysteries, I think the true center and central remnants of those lay obliterated across Scotland. And I know that we've talked, and I think listeners should know that you and I have talked about getting some video footage, looking for those ancient standing stones, those ancient, most squared, polished, well-cut, heart of stone, quartzites, granites, etc., basalts that have been clearly hewn into very large, possibly remnant structural supports. And now they're a standing stone, or now they're a dolmen. And there are so many bizarre remnants of those pieces that have been incorporated in later dynastic peoples. And I know that going around Scotland, looking at some of those things, the first thing that I think you and I talked about, no matter what, we are going to be touring and we are going to be meeting and we're going to be doing that. But at the same time, until then, I think it'll be valuable for everyone for us to maybe even just start that series of getting out to some of those places and you ninja ambushing some sites and Brian Foresting it and getting as much video as you can, and we'll just talk about it at least over the pond.
Yeah, I've got a few pages of draft about that very thing, but we'll wrap up the episode and I'll send you them sometime. Again, thank you so much for your time. All the very best to you and your family. And until next time, Jared Murphy, thank you.
Thank you.
And that was the Jared Murphy Comes Back Onto the Show interview. I'll have to work on the title maybe. I really enjoyed making this cast, and I hope you, my dear listeners, enjoyed it also. I greatly appreciate the time that Jared gave us today, and as always, his honesty and humour in answering my questions. The subject matter we covered was diverse and in some places way out there, both in distance and concept, but I'm definitely all about that. Don't forget to check out Jared's website, notaliens.com, as there is a lot of great content, interviews, photos, and exclusive offers unique to notaliens.com, and not forgetting his book. If you like this episode, please give us a like or share and subscribe if you'd be so kind. If you want to leave a comment on this episode or send me an email with guest suggestions, or you just want to reach out, then please do. You can reach me on the slkpodcast@gmail.com. But either way, please keep them kind. You can find the SLK Podcast on Facebook and Twitter and most podcast platforms. And so, my friends, it's time for me to go. And until I have the pleasure of your company again, be happy, stay safe, bye.
Slick Podcast. Keeping it real and always keeping it groovy.